Fuck, I hate that smell so much. Today, I want to talk about what the best way to clean your pen nib is. You know, I've always read that when you buy a pen nib fresh out of the bag, you have to prep it in some way before you can start using it. And there are many ways to do it. So today, I want to find out what the best way to prep the pen nib is. So the pen nib I'm going to be using today is the Browse 361 Steno Blue Pumpkin. It's the one that I always use. It's the one I'm really familiar with, so I think it's appropriate. And I'm going to be using it with Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay ink in blue. I have with me 6 brand new pen nibs. So one of them is going to be the control nib, and the other 5 I'm going to be testing out a couple of different ways. So let's just run down what we've got here. I've got a dish soap, I have toothpaste, a acetone, which is a nail polish remover that I stole from my roommate. Thank you. I have a lighter, which I also stole from somebody. Also, thank you. And a potato. And so what I want to find out today is, well, first of all, whether you do need to clean and prep your pen nibs at all. And if you do, does it really matter which way you choose to clean it? And if so, which way is the best way? Let's find out. So let's just start off with the control. So the reason you want to clean your pen nib is because it comes with a coating of oil that's meant to protect it from, rust during storage. And so ostensibly, when you're going to use it, you would clean this layer off so that the ink sticks better to the pen nib. And what I want to know with this control experiment is, how bad is it if I don't clean it at all? How unusable is it with the coating on it? And is it going to be really frustrating to use, or does it really make that big of a difference? So with the control nib, it's immediately obvious that there is like some sort of coating of oil on the surface of the pen, because you can see that the ink isn't really like clinging to it evenly. It's sort of beading a lot, and there's like a bit of pooling of liquid in like certain spots, and then there's just like parts of the nib where there's like no ink at all. So my hypothesis is that it could result in an uneven flow rate, but I'm only gonna find out once we do the drawing test. Okay, here we go. For this drawing test, I decided to try out a few different things to test some aspects of the nib and sort of run it through its paces. So the first one is a very simple line test. So a very thin line, and then a thin line going to a thick line, and then varying the pressure, and then one very, very thick line. And you can see that I'm sort of running out of ink here and there. And then just a cross-hatching sort of test just to see if it works in different directions. Maybe just to test the consistency a little bit, but there's a lot of human error there. Here I'm just filling it out. I don't know why, but it seemed appropriate at the time. And then like a circle one just to test what it's like in different directions. And then lastly, something a little bit more practical, what I would actually use the nib for, which is drawing mechs. So here's like a little quick mech bust just to test it out and see what it's like in a quote-unquote real world scenario. So just using the pen nib, honestly, I have to say it's really not that bad. Just judging by the close-ups of like that pen nib with all the beading and the ink not sticking to the nib, I don't really feel that too much. It's really hard for me to compare now before having tried the other nibs. But like as of now, just using it, I don't feel like the pen nib is in any way inadequate or so egregiously bad that I feel like, oh, I have to clean the nib. So the first test I have is the dish soap. Now this is pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna clean it with some soap and water to hopefully get the oil coating off the surface of the nib, and then use it. Give it some water. Okay, a little bit of soap on there. Okay, and that's going to be our dish soap nib. Okay, so just visually, the difference is immediately very apparent. There's a really even coating of blue ink across the whole nib, and every part of the nib has at least some blue ink on it. And I don't know if this is very obvious on camera, but the surface of the nib is definitely a little bit duller, less shiny, and it's very clear that I've removed something from the pen nib. So here is the drawing test for the dish soap pen nib. I felt like with this one, I had to refill my ink a little bit more often, like I kept having to go back in and get more ink. I don't know why exactly that is, but I think it's because the ink flows better when I remove the coating, and so like when I press down, more ink is coming out, which causes me to use more, and therefore I have to refill more often. And I think that's probably true because I felt myself not having to press as hard to get ink out of the nib, and to be honest, like I felt like it was a little bit harder to get thinner lines. Like I would have to not press as hard and be really light with my touch. Not to say that it's impossible to get really thin lines like the previous control nib. It's just that you have to be a little bit more precise with your pressure and not press down as hard. So overall, yeah, I would say there is a difference. It definitely feels a little bit more sensitive. It didn't feel to me like the ink was coming out better or more even per se, just that there was more ink coming out. It's not necessarily better or worse than the control nib. I mean, it's just more sensitive, which is, depending on you, it may or may not be a good thing. So the next one is toothpaste, and I guess the reasoning behind it and why that's different from just regular dish soap is that toothpaste has a little bit of an abrasive element in there, so maybe that would help to scrub off some of the coating a little bit better. Oh, I got some toothpaste on the lens. Oh no. Oh, don't touch it with your hands. That's not good. Okay, look at that. That is such a nice, clean, even coating of ink. It's so satisfying to look at. Definitely looks better than the dish soap one. However, we've already sort of established that just the visual difference doesn't make for better flow, at least not noticeably. Yeah, and so going into the drawing test, honestly, my impressions are the same as the previous one. It definitely performs differently from the control test, but versus the dish soap nib, it's not too big of a difference. It honestly feels the same to me. And just like visually looking at the nib, yeah, sure, the coating of ink is a little bit more even, but whatever advantages you get from that is very, very marginal and honestly not something worth stressing over. So if you have dish soap, just use it. If you have toothpaste, great. You should have toothpaste. Please brush your teeth. So the next one is acetone. I'm just using regular nail polish remover. You could just use pure acetone, but I don't really think it matters too much. Fuck, I hate that smell so much. Some people like the smell of acetone, and I think they're fucking psychos. Alright, I think that's good enough. Here is some close-ups of the ink nib. Honestly, there's not much to say. It's ink on the nib. Here we go with the drawing test. This one I felt like it held ink a little bit better actually. You can tell by the 3 lines that I drew. I got 3.5 lines in before I ran out of ink. So maybe that's worth thinking about. Is it though, really? I mean, ultimately it doesn't really change the nature of the pen nib like whatsoever. Unless you're actually not cleaning it at all, then it slightly changes it. But as long as you're cleaning it, no big diff. next one is the lighter, and I guess the idea is to just, well, you know, burn the oil off of the smoking. Be warned, if you're gonna do this, metal does get hot when you burn it, so try to hold it with something else. Alright, so just before I dip in the ink, I just want to show you how messed up it is by burning it. There, you can definitely see that there's a lot more coating being removed, and there's a very clear line in which there is coating and then the rest is bare metal. It's fine, see, with the ink it's fine, but I wonder if that could lead to longevity problems. Maybe this one wouldn't last as long, and you know, you're ultimately heat treating it in a way by burning it, so you're sort of changing the quality of the metal somewhat. It may end up being a little more brittle, and you know, because I've removed so much of the coating, it may be a little bit more susceptible to rust. But so far, actually, the fire one is by far my favorite. I don't know why, but it definitely felt a little better to use. Maybe because that coating is really removed and the ink flowed a little bit better. But I don't think it's a worthy trade-off, because I really do worry that this pen nib might not last as long as the rest. And lastly, and this is by far the weirdest one, is with a potato. So the idea behind it is that there are certain acids in the potato that will dissolve the coating around the nib. I have to stick the pen nib into the potato and leave it for 15 minutes. No point wasting an entire tater, so I'm just gonna cut this much should do. So now I just have to stick it in. Oh, this is so weird. Alright, it's time to... There you go. Yikes. Yeah, this one not looking so good. It looks a lot more like the control than the ones that have been cleaned. You know, there's a lot of beading. The ink is really not sticking to it that well. It's not great, and I'm a bit disappointed. I did leave it for about more than 15 minutes, somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes, to get like that full effect, which is what I've read online that everyone says you're supposed to do. But still, you know, it didn't seem to work that well. Maybe I used the wrong kind of potato. I don't really know. But yeah, the performance of this is much closer to the control one, where the ink flow is not super high. It takes a little bit more effort to get ink out of the pen nib, and honestly it's just a waste of a good potato, you know, like, and it's the most troublesome, definitely, because I had to wait 15 minutes for it to not work, whereas I could just have used like toothpaste and have it work just as well, if not better. But ultimately, I wouldn't recommend this technique to anyone. I mean, it's just a lot of trouble for very little results. So there you have it. These are the 5 ways to prep your pen nibs. To me, it really doesn't matter too much. Like, the difference between one and the other is so minute that really in the long run it doesn't matter, because ultimately you're going to be cleaning it in between uses anyways. And to be honest, if you just gave me 2 nibs in a blind test, I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference, like, oh, this one is with soap and this one is with a potato. So as long as you clean your nibs in any of these ways, it's gonna be okay. And as far as like the control pen nib, the one that we didn't do any prep work on, it's fine. It's fine. You can use it. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to use like an unprepped brand new pen nib, like I don't even know. But I want to hear from you if you have any like special way of cleaning and prepping your pen nibs that I didn't try here. Let me know in the comments down below. Maybe we'll do a part 2 where I try out some weirder ways to prep the pen nib. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, like it, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time. Have a nice day.